Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to get us started promptly as we have a very packed agenda today. I see that we have participants coming in rapidly, close to 60 now, and I'm expecting that to grow. Just to start with a quick word of introduction, my name is Josh Powell. I'm the CEO of Development Gateway, an international NGO headquartered in DC, but with offices around the world. And a couple of quick typical reminders. I'm going to assume that a year into the pandemic, everyone's virtual conferencing hygiene is quite good, but please remember everyone to keep yourselves muted when you're not speaking, and to be mindful of when your video is on as well. I believe that this is going to be recorded as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. We're here today to discuss the future of data.un. It's been roughly 15 years since its launch. And at the time, it was really an ambitious effort to bring together data under a single, curated, authoritative UN umbrella. The side event is really to introduce and try to encourage and engage all stakeholders on a vision and a proposal for a new UN data that will build on the existing portal and provide better access to available data in line with the new UN Secretary General's data strategy. We'll have a brief opening presentation from Francesca Perucci to discuss the vision of the new data.un. And then we'll have a number of panelists. I'm going to have to be, I think, quite aggressive in keeping us on schedule as we have quite a packed agenda. The side event is linked to the Commission's agenda item 3M, data and metadata presentation and dissemination, and it's going to hopefully provide a good opportunity for an informal discussion and really just a very beginning of a process here that's meant to engage stakeholders in the coming months. Since its launch about 15 years ago, a lot has changed about the world, as we've all experienced, and about the way we perceive and use data in society and in governance. As we strive to achieve the SDGs pushing forward during this decade of action, it's an important moment to reflect on what's needed to make data trusted, valued, and most importantly, used. What creates trust in data and statistics in 2021? It's really no longer enough to simply have a strong brand and institutional heft like the UN. A brand can certainly drive eyes and attention and focus. For example, more than 3 million users per year access the current data.un. But it's also increasingly derived from a process of engagement, from collaboration, and from the ability to interact with and interrogate data independently. So as the new UN data strategy lays out, effective data systems require strong enablers, including people and culture, data governance and strategy, partnerships, and strong technological environments. Today's event, I think, is really an exciting start to an ongoing engagement design process, which will be built with those enablers in mind for the new data.un. So first, a new and open architecture that fosters data interoperability and sharing and use, designed based on an understanding of the needs from a variety of different partners. So there's that partnership, governed with a transparent and ethical framework for data curation and reuse, and supported by a strong culture of data use within the UN system. So thank you very much to everyone for joining. I'm excited to get us started with our panelists. Our first panel, which will get started with Francesca, is going to be really about the vision for the new data.un. And then the second panel will talk more about lessons learned from data dissemination and presentation within the UN system. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Francesca.
Thank you so much, Josh, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So as Josh said, the data landscape has changed dramatically since we launched the first UN data, both in the way we use data and in the amount and type of data that's been offered. The typical user of statistical data now has a fast growing variety of options of data platforms and services from which to choose from. But the proliferation and lack of integration of multiple data portals also leads to sometimes duplication of work and sometimes even confusion among users. The technology has evolved and new approaches and technologies for data integration, presentation, and dissemination have become widely available, including federated architecture architectures and data visualization. Also, if you think in the past, the statistical organizations often relied on a sort of a monolithic architecture, where a single system would govern all elements of the data management, from the database access to the presentation of data tables, visualization on screens, etc. But today, we are challenged to provide a more interactive user experience, targeted at a much wider variety of audiences that require a new type of architecture that emphasizes more modular and decentralized service-oriented data sharing and dissemination workflows. Also, as Josh was highlighting earlier, being an authoritative trusted data platform also requires an inclusive process of engagement with all stakeholders. And they represent both users and producers from different communities. So how do we implement that? What is our vision for the new UN data? We are really seeking a new holistic and integrated approach to the presentation and dissemination of statistical data and metadata and all other related data to different users, with the overall objectives of a better approach for data delivery, for better outcomes for everyone, as it is envisioned in the UN data strategy. We also expect that the realization of this vision will contribute to the statistical expertise and the standards for the implementation of the overall UN data strategy. So what is the new UN data hub? What should it do? We expect it to respond to users' needs, to serve as the main entry point to authoritative statistical data and the corresponding metadata for the whole UN system and all other participating organizations. To be based on a technology that serves both users and producers' needs, so a modern architecture and tool for integration, presentation, analysis, visualization, communication, but also use and reuse of data and metadata. We need to ensure interoperability, so use of standards, common standards, concepts, classifications to facilitate the traceability, integration, and usability of data. But we also need to implement a strong data governance framework that allows the cooperation and participation of all stakeholders, in which the whole UN system and other international, regional, and national organizations and data providers can share responsibility, of course, based on their respective mandates and capabilities. And we have to provide the space for strong engagement of members of both the UN statistical system and all other stakeholders. So to implement this vision, it will be necessary to explore new data integration approaches, including, for example, a federated architecture focused on coordinating sharing and interchanging of information among multiple data hubs that gives visibility to all participating national, regional, and international organizations. While also allowing users to access data services and analytical tools, and enabling both producers and users of data to interact more efficiently. And the federated approach can also provide the space for countries to link their national hubs, as it is increasingly important that countries also are given the space to share their data. But as I want to repeat, it's very important that we engage with the whole data community. So in that sense, we need a mechanism that allows for the different data communities to come together and collaborate and develop further this vision. We are proposing to the UN Statistical Commission a working mechanism that will bring together member states and international and regional organizations, as well as other stakeholders who are active in the area of sharing their own data and using data. Now, the question is, why us? Why the UN? What do we have? What can we offer that other organizations cannot offer? We can be the gateway, and we can count on the contribution of the whole global statistical system. And I mean, not just international agencies, but all our member states and other stakeholders, as we increasingly work very closely with all other stakeholders in the increasingly complex data system. Of course, the feasibility and sustainability of this will depend on the mobilization of resources, and additional resources will be needed, possibly across the UN system, but also external resources, and the commitment of both data users and producers who will collaborate in this initiative. Last thing I want to stress is that we will, of course, build on what's already there, and it's not sort of starting from scratch in a sense. We already have a federated system for SDGs that proved quite effective and successful, where countries can link their national hubs to a global data hub. So we know how that works in a sense. We know how that system can operate. We have UN data, and so the one that was mentioned by Josh established already 15 years ago. So we can look at the experience and the lessons learned from there, and build on that system as we move towards the implementation of the new vision. So I very much look forward to the panel and hearing from the panel their views and their recommendations and suggestions. And I hope we can all work together in a collaborative way to move forward and implement this new vision. And of course, to the discussion at the Statistical Commission and hearing the views of all member states. Thank you so much. Over to you, Josh.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Next, we'll go to Laura Blanco, and really to reflect on two things. The first being, what does the Secretary General's UN data strategy mean for the United Nations? And then also, what does it mean for, and what are the expectations from official statistics?
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and congratulations also for the robust program that you have put together in the margins of the 52nd Statistical Commission. I have actually been following some of the discussions and have heard excellent and very interesting presentations. So to answer your question, Josh, this is a time that demands broadening the discussion around data and revisiting what we held as certainties and expanding the frontiers also of what is being done. And that includes, of course, us at the UN. Even if today's discussion is on portals and availability of data, the truth is that the conversation is happening in the wider context of the strong demands that are being placed on data systems and the challenges and opportunities that this actually entail. So, for example, the way that we are speaking today about the demand for disaggregated or geospatial and real-time data is very different from what we saw only last year, with this being more an imperative than innovation or a best practice as we were thinking about it. So this is actually the context in which the Secretary General launched his data strategy for action, everyone, everywhere, that was adopted in April 2020. And the strategy calls to build the data, digital technology, and innovation capabilities that are needed to succeed in the 21st century. So the Secretary General outlined his vision to transform the UN into a data-driven organization to deliver on a number of areas, from stronger decision-making and policy advice, to greater data access and sharing, which is the topic of the discussion today, and a number of areas that are all meant to deliver better services for people and planet. So at the UN, this means actually overcoming a number of challenges, silos within organizational pillars, bringing together a plethora of existing platforms, and addressing uneven data management practices. And I would add also overcoming confusion, as Francesca said in her presentation. So the strategy calls for action to be driven by data use cases, and the transformation and rebranding that the UN data portal is envisaged by the data strategy itself, with the ambition, though, going beyond development data. So the expectation of the Secretary General is to place user experience, user needs, and clear data with visualization at the center. So to move in this direction, the UN system can build, among others, on the humanitarian data exchange created by OCHA in 2014, and it is going to be presented in the context of this panel. And it will entail, though, putting in place a number of guarantees that we are now exploring. From investing on user research and user design to budgeting on maintenance costs, and ensuring that our agencies, funds, programs, and departments see data as part of the UN's strongest assets and to give it the attention and priority that is commensurate. It will be crucial to allow users to track the implementation of the SDGs rather than accessing disparate UN datasets, for example. And the Deputy Secretary General has called urgently for a state-of-the-art SDG data portal, whether as part of or linked to dataun.org. So you asked me a second question. What does the data strategy demand from statistical offices? And what I would say about this is that, of course, achieving the objectives set by the Secretary General cannot be done outside our collaboration with stakeholders, including the statistical offices. We will need to bring national data together, and we are aware of the multiple challenges that statistical offices face, many of which, by the way, have deepened in the last year, with closures, interruption of activities on their national plans on statistics, and also competition over the use of resources. What we aim to do is to leverage the new capabilities that the RC system and UNCTs have on the ground in support of national statistical systems. And the same can be said at the regional level, where the regional collaboration platforms and issue-based coalitions will be best placed also to support the efforts at the national and regional level. Of course, we need also to see the commitment to data better reflected in budgets of the UN entities, of national governments, and certainly investment levels on data will need to increase. So I am also grateful for the invitation to this dialogue, and actually look forward to hear from the rest of the panel how to make the best of the opportunities at a time where we are actually called to succeed. Back to you, Josh. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So next, someone who needs no introduction, Shada Badi from Open Data Watch. And Shada, if you could reflect on 2 points. First, what in your opinion and based on your team's research makes for a good data portal? And second, what are some of the comparative advantages that the UN has that it should be sure to leverage in this process?
Thanks, Josh. I understand I have 4 minutes, right? So I have to speak really fast and answer both questions. On the first question, I think it's really what Francesca and what we've heard so far and from you, is very important that we have a very user-centric mindset from the start on how to design. And when you actually do that, based on the experience that I have and my group, when you really have a user-centric design, your whole governance, your whole architecture, your whole structure actually becomes, aligned with what you're trying to achieve. We have I have one slide to show you as some of the things that we look for. What does a data site should really do? And some of it is really simple, but it's very important to keep in mind that findability and accessibility and usability of data is very important. We have a tool, in fact, called the data set evaluation tool, which has many, many dimensions. But I just wanted to summarize a few of these features for you. On the findability, it's very important that that from the start that this new portal will have a very strong search engine. I know it's easily said, but many, believe me, many websites do not have a good search engine. It has to have an active dissemination strategy. So it's not only the data producers and data disseminators, but you really need to connect to your communication people and to be able to actually communicate with your users. The user-centric feedback is very important to be able to measure how the data is used and who is using it. On the accessibility, I chose these 3 items to bring to your attention. Quick loading is very important. Again, it's very important. We measure many of the websites loading, and we see that this is a problem. Easy navigation is very important. Whether you have multiple languages, you get a plus sign, plus score on different languages that you offer. And also, more and more, we see best practices for web content accessibility guidelines, where you can actually accommodate people with disabilities, for example. On usability, 3 dimensions that I wanted to highlight is that very important open data standards. UN right now, different websites of UN use different type of standards. So it's very important with the new portal to harmonize and have one clear open data and terms of use license that users will be very clear as what the terms are. Visualization options, everybody knows about it. And of course, providing advanced options for high capacity users like JSON and API. 10 years ago, these were novelties, but of course they are very common things. Together for the user, for these dimensions, I wanted to mention it's very important for the UN to become its own user of data. We call them eating your own dog food, meaning that you have to become a user. You have to know what is there and encourage maybe the chief data officers. So data officers around the UN will become sort of the ambassadors for this new portal. The final 2 points, which I don't have a slide for, so Matthias, you can take the slide away. The final 2 points I wanted to make very quickly. One is that this federated approach is the right approach to take. And the federated approach not only should bring the UN data that's currently available together, like Comtrade, like SDGs, like other data sets, but also provide much more easy link to national data. Many years ago, when we developed this kind of international databases, we were mostly extracting data from everybody and curating it and making it available. But now more and more national data are becoming very prominent. They have good access procedures. So it would be great for UN to do what UN does best and connect us to the country's data and make this a really federated data system. That's one point. The other point, that my final point, is please be ambitious. From the start, think of this not only yet another portal. Think of this of a data service. And behind it, maybe you can showcase and you can bring different tools for users and open source tools and other things. Maybe you can even bring one point of access for negotiations with some of the data providers. Right now, every UN agency or other agencies who want to access the public data, they make their own private data sets. They make their own arrangements and contracting. Maybe the data services behind this service could actually harmonize that and align it, maybe starting from the UN, but then for other agencies. And imagine what a great service it would be. It could also be a very good sort of an honest broker for access to microdata. Right now, every agency, when we want to access microdata, every agency has a slightly different procedures how they provide access to microdata. But maybe this could be a place for at least harmonizing agreements on how to access microdata. Overall, I have a lot more to say, Josh, but I stop here. But my final message is this is a really right time, and I hope we can come together and raise the resources for the UN to be able to bring this amazing new portal for us all to benefit from. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shada. We'll go now to our last panelist, Padraig Dalton from the Ireland Central Statistics Office. And two questions for you. The first is, where do you see the value and the potential for UN data for you as a provider of data? And secondly, what does it need to be able to offer to you in kind of your job and from your perspective?
Okay, thank you very much, Josh, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I'm going to try and avoid repeating what Lara and Shaida have spoken about earlier on. I don't want to repeat what they've said, but I suppose the first thing is that to think about what this platform is really all about, what UN.data is about, and it's really about giving users a better access to the breadth of official data across the UN system, and that's the fundamental problem we're trying to solve here. It's about trying to get data out into the system and inform decision makers and inform citizens. When I think about it, I think about that UN data will be the lens through which users won't just see UNSD or anything. It's how they will see the global statistical community. And that's really, really important, actually, because it doesn't just affect the UN, it affects every single compiler of official statistics. And so what I would say is when you're thinking about this, think about it in the context of the core values of official statisticians. Think about it in the context of, publishing without fear or favor, independence, objectivity, equality of access, being relevant. These are all what we're about. If we're not doing those things, we're not doing our job. And in a way, I think it's also about reflecting a global statistical community that, for me, that's modern, innovative, and ambitious. So I think it needs to give those messages. One of the things I think that I would highlight is the data sources you're going to use to populate your platform. And I think this is really, really important. I suppose as a statistician and an official statistician, you won't be surprised to hear me to say, focus on official compilers of statistical data. They need to be reliable, sustainable, and resilient. And I think you should focus on those data sources to populate your platform. I understand that where data gaps arise, there can very often be a temptation to take the easy option, which is to go for the official data, the unofficial data that's out there. And there's a lot of it. But remember, unofficial data is broadly unregulated. Sometimes there's a lack of transparency in the methodology, and there's a lack of transparency around the metadata. And I know the gaps can be annoying, but I suppose I'm just saying I'm urging caution in terms of the data sources you're going to use, because we don't want decision makers making decisions on poor quality data. And I know it's a big challenge, so I'd urge caution around the data sources piece. The users now, and you all know this, they're incredibly sophisticated in their needs now. And what we find an awful lot more is they're looking for cross-country comparisons. And obviously we're part of the EU, and they're always looking for comparisons across the EU, but increasingly now they're looking for comparisons across the globe. And I think the UN, this platform can play this trusted third party for us, this trusted third party role, so that I can say to users who are looking for this kind of comparative data, go to the UN platform. They have reliable official sources. It's easy to use, it's easy to access, and you can trust that the data sources that are there are really good. So, but to do that, you obviously have to be using the appropriate sources, and you have to make sure you have good quality metadata on your platform, and that's not easy. We all know that metadata is as difficult as getting good quality data. My next point is really around this thing, and it touches on what Shaida said earlier on. It's in Ireland, we don't see the NSI anymore as being just compilers of data. We see ourselves as being compilers of data, providers of services, but also providers of insight. And there's a difference between data and insight. And I think that's really, really important to understand that difference, and to use the platform and to imagine the platform in a different way. Things like, as we've spoken about before, visualizations, infographics, storyboards, where you extract the message from the data and you ensure that the insight, it's not just the data that's on the platform, but the insight is also on the platform. That's a very ambitious target, but I think it's something that can be done, and I think there are some examples from around the globe where you could learn from it and hopefully go beyond what others are doing and set the standard for very many of us. And the last piece that I would say at this stage is just collaboration is really important. And as a compiler, really what we want to do is, if we can provide the data once, and have it used often, that's great. So if we're providing data to Eurostat, it would be great that this platform will just, through APIs, etc., suck the data from Eurostat, and anything else that needs to be done outside of what we provide to Eurostat, of course, we can provide that directly. But let's make sure we do this in an effective and an efficient manner. So hopefully that's some slightly different insight from the others, but I think it's a real opportunity here, and I think the UN and this platform is going to be the lens to official statistics, and that's a really important. There's a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot of responsibility there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I quite like the tagline of a lens to the global statistics community. I think that's a good way to be thinking about this. And just to summarize a few of the key points, I think there are some clear assets within the UN system in terms of the data that it controls, but also in terms of the data and the relationships to data that it has across different countries. And I think that's a really key thing to be able to leverage in this process. There's also a very clear message that the demands and the complexity of demands from users has gotten a lot more sophisticated, and there need to be more ways to be able to deliver those data, to be able to deliver insights, and also to be able to provide trusted data that others can build insights from. So I think that's a really critical piece. I think Shada's points on user-centered design and some of the tips and kind of structured way of thinking about that the Open Data Watch team have created are going to be really important inputs to this process. And I think there's also a very clear need to move from data management toward data governance. And so that goes into, questions of, how do you fill those data gaps thoughtfully and carefully? How do you ensure that there's a common approach to licensing, to metadata documentation, and so forth across different offices and different silos within the UN system? I think that's really critical as well. And I think moving from trying to be a kind of monolithic entity, as Francesca said, one platform to rule them all, into a real gateway to be able to access data across different platforms is going to be really critical. So this brings, I think, a combination of the humility to say that this portal doesn't need to have everything in it to be everything to everyone, but also the ambition to say that it should be something that drives better accessibility and better insights for everyone from across the global statistics community and the broader data community. So I think there's quite a lot of rich inputs there, and I'm sure everyone on the panel will be keen to engage moving forward. So with that, I'm going to move us toward the next panel, and happy to say that thus far we're moving well on time. So thanks to everyone for that as well. The next is really focused on what are some of the lessons learned from across the UN system on the role of the UN in communicating data. And so we'll start with Sarah Telford from UN OCHA, really to talk about, among other things, the HDX platform and what makes that quite successful. And also, what have you learned through that process in terms of communicating with users and processing their feedback?
Great, thanks, Josh. I think everyone has touched on all of the things I was going to say. So I think we all know what is needed for successful data platforms, but maybe just to tell the story of HDX, we started it in 2014. And I think the reason, one of the early reasons we were successful is that we spent a lot of time trying to understand the problem. So it wasn't, we need to create a site and let's just do it. It was really a big investment, a very big in terms of our overall budget for year one in user research and talking to people to say, what is it that you really need? What is it that is going to be important for you? And through those conversations, we went to Colombia, we went to Kenya, we had a lot of calls with our colleagues in the field. There were three things that came out. One was that it needed to be sort of friendly and easy to use. There isn't, in our sector, humanitarian sector, there isn't a lot of time to kind of read and understand. It just has to be easy. I need the data, I need to get on with my job. So that was important. The other was trust, that when someone came to the site, they needed to be able to trust the data that was there. So that meant we needed to invest in the metadata, making sure that we knew, we were telling people where the data was coming from, but also in terms of the types of organizations that we were going to enable to share their data. And the third big insight, I think, was that it wasn't just about a new product, but about a service. And this is a really big distinction to maybe keep in mind with UN data, that it isn't just here's the data and you go there and you can find it and use it, but an ongoing relationship that you need to build with your community. And we found that the big sort of moment for us was working with the World Food Program early on to find out what was it going to take to get them to share their data on Hdx. They had their own platform. They, what was the benefit to them? And really, in the end, it was that we could add value to their data. We built a visualization that actually is still up on the site now. And that became what they called the Hdx Advantage, so that they shared their data and then we did something to it to improve it. And more people were going to download the data from WP on our site than even on their own site. And that feedback loop created the momentum and the proof of concept for others to come on board. So those are some big things to keep in mind. I would say, just in terms of the communication point, I think there's two types of communication to think about. One is communicating with your community, what's happening and what are we doing and why are we doing it and what are the features and that all of that. We had a blog from very early days to sort of be very transparent about what we were trying to do and ask for feedback. The other is communicating the data and the data insights, which you've talked about. And I think in this space, there are, I think, really two groups of users. One, they want the data, they want to come in, they want to download it, and they want to do their analysis. And the other is they want to just see the insight and understand what the issue is for their decision. So being able to offer both of those kind of journeys, I think, is really important. And the final point I will say is on maintenance, that none of this is just a one-off thing. It takes, I think we did some estimate recently, about 75% of our team's effort is on maintenance. So making sure that when people go there, the data is there, that it's up to date, that they can find what they need, and things don't, things are breaking all the time. So how do we make sure that that's there? So I'll just stop there and offer some more points later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think those points about the different types of use cases and user journeys ties back to what Laura said earlier in terms of the data strategy. We'll go next to Melinda Kuzner from CETA. And Melinda, if you could speak to, as a donor and as a funder of these and similar efforts, what are some of the lessons learned that you've seen around disseminating and communicating data and statistics that are relevant for the new UN data? And related to that, where do you see really the role of the new UN data in communicating statistics?
Thank you, Josh, and thank you also to all the previous speakers that have mentioned things that help me economize with the time here. What I would like to lift is that when looking at statistics, we can't just look at the end of it. We have to look at the entire life cycle of the data. And it's not enough just to make it available, it also has to be trusted. And the users need to know what to do with information they have at hand, right? Since 2010, Swedish aid has fallen under a Swedish transparency guarantee. And around the same time, Sweden joined the International Aid Transparency Initiative, IADI. This meant that we published timely data that would be easily available on the web in an open format, machine readable, and in a common standard. So what we had here was a situation where it wasn't anymore that what happened in the system stayed in the system. So we started looking at our data and at other people's data differently. And even if we were limiting ourselves to development and humanitarian support, we found it quite difficult to compare our data with other publishers. I mean, it wasn't that we were comparing apple and oranges, but rather maybe apples and pears. And it needed to be that because the data relevant for an NGO is obviously going to be different from that of a donor. And you need a common standard to make sense of all of that, but also a certain amount of flexibility, because if you squeeze it all too much, then it's going to be easy to compile, but it's just not going to make any sense, right? But the result is then that the understanding of the data is difficult, and you can raise the awareness of the data all you want, but without building the capacity to collect, manage, and analyze data, the data is just going to be laying there. And the data is not going to be used unless they see a value of it. And if you don't trust the data, well, then you don't have any use for it, right? And so we also saw that when we started using the data more, started eating our own dog food, thank you, Shaida, for that expression, that there were discrepancies in the data. And we had to go back. So we recently did a review of our data ecosystem and looked at the data quality. We defined the information ownership, the policies for data security, and we took in feedback from users to update the data we published and also the visualization platform to make it available. And we also see that there are so many different uses of data, and but there we have the added value of a common standard. Even for the users outside of the Swedish context, we can make use of the efforts that other people have made, and I think that's where the UN really can tap in, because there's so many strengths that the UN has to capitalize on. There's a lot of data available from a wide variety of providers. There's an initial trust in you that you can maintain, and you have the ability to support partner countries in their capacity to participate in global dialogue and follow up on the 2030 agenda. But you won't be able to fill all the needs. I think that if you show the possibilities, wake the imagination and lead the way, and also allow the user then to take it on from there, I think you'll get a far way with that.
Great, thank you very much, Melinda, and also thank you for giving a demonstration of how reuse can lead to efficiencies. Next we'll come to Ashwell Jenniker in the Statistics South Africa. And two questions for you as well. The first being, in your professional experience, what are some of the resources and arrangements that are really needed to be able to have a data platform that brings data from multiple providers together? And also, what do you see as the role of UN data in supporting national efforts in data dissemination and communication?
Just unmute myself. Thank you, Josh, and good day to all. Now, we live in a total different world. I mean, as devastating as COVID was mentally and physically on all of us, I mean, it's created enormous opportunities for us in the statistics community, because you now have got a situation where there's people who's never looked at data before. They go and look at data every day. And then you've also got, so people want to know how many people are positive, how many people is in hospital, how many people died. Now, as my previous boss, Dr. Padilatla, said, you should never let a good crisis go to waste. Now, certainly this is a crisis that we should not go to waste as people compiling a data platform. Now, okay, let's talk about the resources and the arrangements. For one, we need to have human resources that could merge technology and data. So we need the type of data scientists that could show us visualization, because it's key when you start these platforms that you show value very soon. So let's say, for example, here in South Africa, we've got Department of Education, who's a contributor to our data platform. Yesterday, the children went to school. So one of the questions that was asked, are schools safe at the moment? So you need to make sure that the data platform addresses that to Department of Education. So as they contribute their data, they also need to get answers immediately from the platform. But not just Department of Education. I mean, their customers or their stakeholders, like the parents, the children, the teachers, they also need to use the platform. And in that cycle, you get buy-in for people to contribute more. Okay, so what is it that in South Africa, we've got low sort of maths literacy, statistics, and data literacy. So what is it that you expect from the data scientist? So for one, they need to make sure that the access is seamless. So the users that goes and uses the platform, they don't need to worry about size and where the data is. They should just click on the link and it takes them there and they access the data. Secondly, the data visualization should be to such an extent that ordinary people can understand it. So you don't need complicated things. It must be simple and easily understandable to everyone. And then we need to show and bring value soon. So you need to create value and you need to appropriate value. So for example, if you show occupancy in hospitals, you need to make people understand that this is important because the more people there are in hospital, the less ventilators there are. Few ventilators means people die. As soon as people start seeing that, the numbers takes on a total new dimension. Okay, so I was saying that the contributors, like Department of Education, for example, they need to be the users of your system. And if the contributors are the users, over time, your data will become so much better. Initially, when you start, you might find it's not that good, but as people are using it, it's improving over time. You must have a sensible governance structure in place. In South Africa, we've decided to be a bit soft on the standards for inclusion initially. So Department of Health, Department of Education, everyone who contributes to the data platform, we allowed them to bring their data, warts and all. So we weren't hard, we were soft. We just focus on access, visibility, and transparency. So we said, let's start there. Let's make sure the data is available. Later on, when you've got more buy-in, you can start talking about standards, data quality measures, sort of more the harder stuff. Okay, so let's talk about the role of the UN data. We need good case studies. We need to see what works and what does not work. Now, UN data, with its skills, expertise, and network, can coordinate these for us. So that as new countries want to start up, as other people are learning, let's see what case studies are working and what's not working. Many countries can't afford costly mistakes. And UN data could play a guiding role in terms of what brings value early. Because if you bring value early, you get more investment. And that more investment helps you to build more. And that's what we will need to get our platforms supported, motivated, and people to invest in it. Let me stop there for now. Thanks, Josh.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we'll go now to our last panelist, Rolando Ocampo, UNECLAC Director of the Statistics Division. So the question for you is, first, what works in your region in terms of data dissemination and communication? And then secondly, where do you see the role of the UN data system in supporting regional efforts in data dissemination and use?
Thank you, and good day to all of you. And I think regarding the first question, and this is a very good time to reflect about the way we are communicating regionally. Let me share my screen. And in this regard, and with a better dissemination. Do you see my screen? Okay, in this regard, with better disseminating our available data, we decide to update our statistical portal region, call it Cephalestat. This process took us more than 2 years for the development of the new concept of the redesign of the website. In this effort, we extend all the accessible information and incorporated new and timely statistical information from the region, the Latin America and the Caribbean, including all the information that we produce in our organization. This website has the possibility to make a presentation of the statistical data to graphics and to geographical information, incorporating geospatial information for economic, environmental, and climate change fields. We believe that adding the geospatial visualization to the information will improve our way of disseminating and communicating the data. Here you can see all the information, and as Lara mentioned, we have in this portal the link to all the SDG information through our the regional collaborative platform that we have, the interagency agency platform, call it SDG Gateway. We have all the information, and you can identify it from here. So CEPAL-STAT is a development of open data, and it's with this open source we approach, and we want to motivate all the countries, and we have a funding from the European Union trying to involve the statistical offices just to adequate and to incorporate all the geospatial information and to see the visualization of the statistics information. We intend that CEPAL-STAT be the gateway of the statistical information that comes from national statistical offices and the different ministers and countries, providing opportunity of dissemination of the national official data around the region, led by the regional commissions. Regarding your second question, so I want to mention that UN data can play a very important role in both tracks for regional commission, for our regional commissions. On one hand, having comparable and updated information from the global data is essential. And in the other hand, the regional commissions can be providers of information for the UN data portal. I believe that it is essential to have coordination with the regional commissions, since we are closer to the countries and their national offices that are the ones that produce data. And we provide at the regional level support to capacity building for better generation of information. Lastly, I think that we should ensure in all cases the construction of interoperable platforms that allow data to be transmitted in both ways, and to avoid the forced duplication. With this, UN data could contribute to better dissemination and communication of national, regional, and global data. I want to close with one sentence that I heard in a global geospatial meeting from our one colleague from Singapore, and they say it's that we need the 3 C's. The 3 C's. It's coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those 3 C's are a very good calling card for this process moving forward. So we're a few minutes ahead of schedule, which is by design, because we're going to go into a fairly ambitious task now, which is to ask each of the 7 panelists to keep themselves to 1 minute each, to give their 2 or 3 bullet points of really your top advice for this process. So I'm going to have a stopwatch here. At 1 minute, I'll hold up a finger and give 10 to 15 seconds of grace period for that to use up our bit of extra time that we have here. After that, Stefan Schweinfest will give his closing remarks and reflections on what we've heard today in this very rich discussion. So we'll start with Lara, and we'll go in the same order that we proceeded in the presentations. Lara?
Thank you very much, Josh. I think that efficiency and keeping the user in mind. Of course, we have the capabilities and we have the possibility of making sure that the data is trusted. We know how to do that, but I think that where we need to get better, and we need to do it quickly because we cannot afford delays, is in terms of making the data accessible in a simple way for, and keeping users in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. That was just 30 seconds. So I think that you've donated an extra 30 seconds to Shada, who I think may make good use of them.
Thank you. Well, I absolutely go back to say that the link and engagement with countries would be very important and should be really at the center of this. And of course, the user-centric design that that we talked about should be guiding this design and sort of the regular operation of this work. And then the third thing would be that it really thinks outside the box and not just of today's data needs and requirements, but what can this be for the next 10 years? So I think I'm having a little bit of computer problem, and I hope you can hear me, Josh. But this was
We can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. These were my big wish list. But the last one is very important because I know there's some concerns about whether this should be just official data or could it be, sort of a gateway to some catalogs of non-official data or not, or what. But these issues we could really sort out. And it's better to keep the options open and sort of see where we can go with this new portal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shada. Padraig, over to you.
Thanks, Josh. The first thing I'd say is focus on the art of the possible. I think that's really, really important. And we've spoken about being user-centric, but remember, users aren't a homogeneous group. There are multiple types of users, so remember that when you're thinking about a user-centric approach. Secondly, we often think about these platforms as dissemination platforms. It's not. We need to think about it as being beyond that. It's a communications platform. It's a platform where we can provide insight. So I think we need a communication strategy to go with this, but think about it in an ambitious way. The last thing I'd say is we operate in a competitive environment, and I think the UN needs to be a strong presence within that data space. And I think that this platform, as I said earlier on, is the lens through which users can assess the relevance and the value of official statistics. And I think you need to see it in that way. So you need to focus on the core values. And also, I think a couple of people have mentioned accessibility, open data, whatever possible, those standards are really, really important. So they're my 3 thoughts. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. In 59 seconds, very well done. Next, we'll go to Sarah.
I think the challenge that I would see is that you're not starting from nothing. You have a platform and you have 3 million users, from what I understood at the beginning. So I think that's hard because to create something from nothing is easier than going in and changing what you have. So I think that will be challenging. I mean, just looking at it, just having a design refresh would be great, and you'd probably get some wins out of that. So not to try and solve every problem, but maybe to do some of this incrementally. The other, I would say, is to think about the technology framework. So, I think the UN, sometimes we get in our own way, and to really think about open source frameworks and making this accessible and repeatable. The other is the model that you use. And we use a network model, meaning that any organization that is on the platform can share data from anywhere. And so it makes it scalable. And I think that's something that you're going to have to consider is how does this become something that can be maintained and scaled over time. Maybe the final thing, and I'm maybe out of time, is data storytelling has been one of the things that's had the most impact with our community. So not only thinking about the data, the sort of catalog and however you do that, but the story. What is the story? What are we trying to say? And how do we bring people along? Because the broader point is that we're trying to reduce poverty and hunger and save lives. And so trying to bring that mission into the platform, I think, can be really helpful.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And I would certainly endorse the point that it's a lot harder to rebuild something than to build it the first time. Next up, we'll go to Melinda.
Yeah, I would speak for timely data, as it's quite instrumental, but at the same time, beware of the trust in data. I would say that pick a lot of low-hanging fruits, but have high ambitions. Maximize the synergies, streamline, and rationalize resources as much as you can. I would also say that it can be a good thing to wake the curiosity, show what's possible, make it usable, but don't try to fill every need. But at the same time, stay brave. After all, it's uncharted territory.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next to Ashwell.
Thank you, Josh. Firstly, show value early. I mean, you can't be all things to all people. So you probably need to segment your user community. I mean, during COVID, we decided to prioritize the president and cabinet and the joint operations committee. So segment your market and then show value to those strategic important partners. Do not overburden suppliers of data with rules and regulations. Try to make it easy for people to contribute their data. Build flexible systems that will make loading easy. I mean, we find there's a lot of software now that will take data in any format and build it into the system. So investigate flexible software so that you don't overburden the supplier and overburden the receiver in terms of loading the data. Invest in visualization to make statistics. I'm not sure if one could say sexy on this platform, but let's say usable, not sexy. But make statistics usable or sexy. So invest in that visualization. I've also heard storytelling. So invest in that, make sure that people understand it. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Rolando, to you next.
Thank you. I just want to continue with this. This is not an statistical challenge only. So it's an issue for design of this portal. So we need computer designers to do this. And my second bullet is that please try to. This is a big opportunity to incorporate all the geospatial information into the statistics. This is a great opportunity. And third, I just want to say this that please take in account all the effort that we are doing in the regional offices of the UN. This is a global effort and from the UN, and we cannot leave no one behind in this regard. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for all of your really rich interactions and responses. I also want to note that there was some good conversation happening in the chat, which I'm sure is being captured as inputs for future design and discussion as well. So with that, I'll hand over to Stefan to wrap us up.
Thank you. Wow, with all the bullets that were flying my way, it's quite surprising that I'm still standing here. But I took extensive notes, and this was really fantastic. I think it was the UN at its best. I mean, if we had to pay for all of you as high-powered consultants, I would have to probably break the very small UN bank, and I could not afford all of you. So thank you very much for this 1 hour of high-intensity thinking along with us. What did I hear? Let me just share a few notes. I mean, Lara was talking about challenges and opportunities of this moment and reminded us that data is an institutional asset of the UN. Shada is always reminding me that we have to be user-centric and that we have to have a service mentality. Pedrag was pointing to the official statistical systems and asked us not to only provide data, but go further and provide insights. Sarah pointed out on the need to have continued and ongoing relationship and communication, and reminded us also to be careful not to get too fancy at the beginning, because there is maintenance afterwards, a very wise counsel. Melinda reminded us, and Sweden, of course, as all of you know, is at the base of what we have already. SIDA was funding this project many, many years ago, and I'm glad you're at the table with us again. Data as a public good, also the accountability dimension of data. Ashwell, I think there's nothing wrong with sexy statistics. I sometimes use that line if it gets us attention and it has a meaning behind, a deeper meaning behind it, that is okay. And you pointed to the importance of showing early value, and that is also good advice. And Rolando, we can always count on you to point out the importance of the regional dimension as part of the architecture. And he showed us even some slides, maps, geospatial dimension, as I always talk about the marriage of statistics and geospatial information. So where does that leave us in terms of the overall conclusions? Yes, I mean, users have to be really central, but users are not homogeneous. User segmentation, this is something that we will have to work on. I was very pleased to hear that we as the UN, we still carry a little bit of a brand name, and I think we can be not aggressive. We are never aggressive, but we can be assertive that we are the right place to start this effort. And because various dimensions, quality is of course one. Well, speed is also a dimension of quality, and the UN has never been accused of being hasty. So perhaps in terms of speed, that's not one of our strongest sides. But everybody mentioned, or several people mentioned, that we are impartial, that we are an honest broker, and in particular, we can ensure, which is very important, the over time and over space consistency of data, so that we can actually aggregate, we can compare between all the countries in the world, and we can compare over time because we can keep systems constant. Partnerships was a key word that I heard, and partnerships, there are several partners sitting here around the table, and I also noted partners in the chat. I mean, colleagues from ECE and the OECD have been putting their inputs, and I'm very grateful. And there is partnerships on many, many levels, on the technical level, on the data level, on the data use level. And I think we need as many partners as we can possibly get. And then, of course, one key point is technology and standards, that we have to have really up-to-date and the high technology and the highest standards. Shada was asking us that we should not aim to satisfy the demand of today, but we should actually think about tomorrow. And if you don't shave as often as I do now and you have a gray beard, you do the one lesson that you learned is that tomorrow is here much faster than you think. So I think that is a very good piece of advice, that we should have young people sitting at the table who can guide us with what they expect, not only now, but what they are dreaming of perhaps in a couple of years from now. So I think this was really an extremely rich discussion. So where do we go from now? This is part of the Statistical Commission, and Josh pointed out that there is a sort of the classical UN pedestrian process. There is an official document out there, Agenda Item 3M. It's in 6 languages. It gives a good account of where we stand and what we are proposing to do, in particular, moving forward, working on this exciting task of creating this UN gateway, I think is a good word that I heard, entryway. And So we are asking the Statistical Commission for the approval of the vision, of the basic ideas, but unfortunately in this virtual Statistical Commission, we won't have a lot of time to collect ideas, but perhaps through the written statements, we will get some more ideas. And this side event was, of course, the moment for us to go a little bit deeper and collect all of your and harvest all of your ideas. So I'm very thankful again. And then we want to move forward. I think we have something to build upon, as several people pointed out, that is at the same time a foundation and something solid to stand on. On the other hand, it also can be an impediment. So we have to be smart on how we use that. I think we asking for the Commission to approve a mechanism. The UN always forms teams and groups, an interagency and expert group. And I think I'm pretty confident that the UN will approve that proposal. So then after the Commission, as of 2 weeks from now, we can move forward. And as you know, as one of my old bosses once said, no good deed goes unpunished. Many of you in this room, I think, are very established their credentials today to be partners as we are moving forward, to be part of that thinking group. You have advised the step-by-step approach. I think I heard two words that as a UN bureaucrat I know only too well. On the one hand, dreams and ambition, and on the other hand, resources and humility. And I guess squaring that problem is going to be my privilege in the future, and I'm looking forward to doing it together with all of you. But when I'm asking, I was just thinking today, when I'm asking for resources, I very often emphasize that I'm not Donald Duck and only think in dollar signs. There are many forms of resources. Of course, money wouldn't hurt to help us move this forward. But I mean, there are also knowledge resources, experiences, or even ideas. All of those things are important resources as we move forward. So I think I'm really very much looking forward to working with you, and I invite you and invite all of you, not only the panelists, but also the audience that participated actively in the chat, to be part of this journey. Let me say at the end, thank you very much. This was really great. Thanks to Josh. You did a great job shepherding us through this. It was fun, sharp questions, and you managed time. I mean, this is really, you win the first prize of all the moderators of our side events here. Thank you to all the panelists, Francesca for her presentation, of course, Lara, Shada, Pedrak, Sarah, Melinda, Ashwell, and Rolando for your contribution. And thank you also to my team, because as I always say, I'm only the director. I couldn't do this with all of the people from wonderful colleagues from my own team in UNSD under Francesca's leadership, who are behind this event and put the thoughts and the choreography together, and who will be helping me to follow up. And I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great fun and a pleasure. So thank you to everybody here around the table.
And thank you.
Thank you, and take care. Those are the most
everyone.
important words these days here.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone. Be
Thank you,
safe.
Josh. Thank everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Matthias. Thank you.